This is Hannah, and I'm photobombing my dad. Welcome to the Motocross Vault.
Hello, this is Tony Blazer back with another video here for the Motocross Vault on YouTube. And what we're going to do in this one is we're going to look back at the all-new 1996 YZ250. This bike was a major redesign, very important motorcycle for Yamaha in a lot of ways. Although this first edition wasn't particularly awesome, it would lead to much better motorcycles and really kind of pave the way for Yamaha's dominance of the 250 class in the late 90s and early 2000s. The styling, as you can see here, is actually kind of still in the DNA of the motorcycle. The current YZ250 still has a lot of the basic look of the 96 here, and it was a major departure from 95. In 95, Yamaha had a very successful motorcycle. It had won motocross action shootouts, been very, very popular bike. I own one, great motorcycle, real easy to ride, good overall machine, but 96 was, like I said, a really big change. Initially, actually was a worse motorcycle than 95, but after a couple of years they got all that sorted out, and it turned out to be a great model for Yamaha. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe and share the video. It's definitely helpful to the channel. If you want to support the channel, I do have some Motocross Vault merchandise, all sorts of things, mugs, t-shirts, cups, hats, whatever, at redbubble.com. And if you just go there and search the Motocross Vault, you can help us out, and I certainly appreciate it. And like I said, if you like this sort of thing, tell your friends. Here is the story of the 1996 YZ250. As I said before, the 95 YZ250 was a really great motorcycle in a lot of ways. The bike was only mildly updated for 95. There were some suspension changes, slight frame geometry changes. By far the biggest change was the motor in 95. This was the first year that Yamaha added a resonance chamber to their power valve system. Up until this point, the basic motor design was the same going all the way back to 1982. They had that kind of a drum-style Yamaha power valve system, which used a rotating cylinder in the that basically covered and uncovered the top of the exhaust port based on engine RPMs. For 95, they added a resonance chamber, which was kind of a play off of what Kawasaki had been doing with the Kips, and very similar to what Honda had with their ATAC system. It basically combined the ATAC and then also the YVPS, the Yamaha Power Valve system, into one unit. This gave the motor a very broad and smooth power band, excellent tractability. This was a great motor. The only thing I didn't like about it was it didn't need race gas, but the bike could basically hook up on anything. Real great motorcycle. But for 96, Yamaha basically threw out everything but the motor and came out with an all-new bike. The 96 model is a total redesign from stem to stern. As you can see here, everything is new on this bike. The bodywork is completely redesigned. The color is very different. This is the first year for the blue. As you can see, the fenders, the front and rear fenders are still white, so it's kind of a half and half deal. The frame is white, doesn't have the full blue treatment they get a couple years later, but this is the first bike to use that dark blue. In 95, the factory bikes had ran that really dark navy blue. At the time, I was not a fan of that. I thought it was weird, but obviously it's grown on me over time. I like it now, but in 96, I thought that was kind of a strange-looking motorcycle. Both the 125 and the 250 were all new for 96. The frame, the bodywork, the suspension, everything, like I said, but the motor was largely new for 96. The new chassis shortened the wheelbase, reduced weight, and increased rigidity over the outgoing 95 YZ. The swing arm was also redesigned, and the linkage was repositioned as well. One of the issues people had in from 93 to 95 at that series of YZs was the bike tended to kind of droop down under acceleration. It would squat, and No Lean and DeVol sold some links, aftermarket links, that would prevent that behavior. So for 96, Yamaha wanted to address it and reposition the linkage and change the curve so it would prevent that from happening. So like I said, both the swing arm and the linkage was completely redesigned and designed to go with the all-new shock as well. On the power plant side, the 96 YZ was largely a carryover from 95 with some fairly minor modifications. It maintained the same power valve design, so it had the EGR, the exhaust resonance chamber, that was added in 95. But they also added some new porting and lightened the piston as well. The piston was slightly lighter for 1996. They changed the head to up the compression slightly over 95, and bolted on a new carburetor. They went to a 38mm Keihin PWM carburetor for 96. Now on the intake side, that was pretty significantly modified. They changed the air boot to get a little more straight shot at the carburetor. Now that's something that obviously, everybody knows. That's why you'd use like a ram air effect, or one of the problems with having a single shock is the fact that it has to kind of wrap around the shock. Doesn't give you the best velocity into the intake. So for 96, they changed that around a little bit to try and give it a straighter shot to boost power. They also redesigned the exhaust to work with the new motor, and added a lowboy exhaust, which was kind of a first for the YZ. Honda had that feature since 1990. I'm sorry, since 1988. And Yamaha had kind of a sort of lowboy, but had not gone completely all the way. And for 96, they finally committed and went with a full lowboy exhaust and a pretty sweet looking alloy silencer as well. On the suspension end of things, Yamaha set up a all new front end for the 96 YZ250. The forks were, as I said, all new. They were 46 millimeter Kayavas. This was 3 millimeters larger than 1995. This was to give the bike a little more rigidity and better steering feel. The front axle was also enlarged. It had a 20 millimeter front axle, again, to make the steering more precise. And they also changed the clamps to be stronger and, again, to fight flex. These new forks had some internal changes, but they maintained the mid-valve design that had been used in 1995. Out back, a new KYB shock was paired with the redesigned Motocross linkage. The shock itself was very similar to 1995, but it did feature new valving inside to try and work better with that linkage and prevent that droop like we were talking about in 1995. A couple more interesting little tidbits here for 96 that were new. This was the first year where Yamaha added this little ram air to the air box through the top of the seat. As you can see, they put some little vents into the top of the rear fender, and that would allow a little more air to get into the motor. Kind of a neat idea. Like the intake track, the idea was to get a straighter shot to the carburetor, get a little more of a ram air effect, and get a little more power out of the motor. Another thing that was new for 1996 was this Akabono, I think I'm saying that correct, front master cylinder. At this time, Honda had the best brakes in motocross. It wasn't KTM like it is now. It was Honda dominated basically from the first time they added disc brakes to the CRs in 1984. They were at the forefront of disc brake technology. I think Yamaha got a little tired of that in 1996, so they went with Akabono instead of Nissan for the front brake, and it was very adjustable and actually gave it really great performance. It was the first time really Yamaha was competitive with Honda. And the last thing, of course, is the new styling here. If you see the shroud, these YZ graphics were actually pretty mild by mid-90s standards. They were less crazy probably than the lightning bolts and lavender color and stuff they'd used the last couple of years. I actually love the look of the 95 YZ, and I did not really like this in 1996, but now it looks pretty cool in a 90s kind of way. Probably love it or hate it, but nostalgia has a way of making things look cooler after the fact. Now, in terms of actual performance on the track, the 96 YZ250 turned out to be pretty disappointing. My best friend had one of these, and it was slow. I mean, I could ride it back to back with my 95 YZ250, and it felt way slower than the 95. And the 95 wasn't really a rocket, it was just smooth. It was slower than my 1990 CR250. The motor in 95 had been very broad, had a super broad power band, was pulled from the very low end all the way to the top end. It wasn't, blazing fast like a Honda that year, but it was really easy to ride and strong. This 96 was mid-range only. All the little tweaks they made to the motor somehow kind of narrowed that power band down. It actually ran much more like a early 90s Suzuki, which were mid-range only. There wasn't much low end, really strong mid-range hit, but there actually wasn't a lot of peak horsepower. It just felt like it was because the low end was so soft. When it finally did come on the power band, it came on pretty strongly, but as soon as it hit, it kind of signed off. There was no over rev. If you screamed it out, it only went slower. Really disappointing motor. And like I said, surprising after the last couple of years. Pretty much the worst running Yamaha since I don't know, maybe 1983 or something. It was surprising, especially after, like I said, the last couple of years. The handling was pretty good. That's one thing that did improve. Like I said, the 93 to 95s, the bikes were really good, but they weren't the best turning bikes. A lot of people complained about that. And the 96 did turn better. The new stiffer chassis, sharper turning geometry, it definitely made a difference. The bike handled well. The suspension, on the other hand, was pretty terrible. Both the front and rear were real soft. They'd bottom out over anything. They kind of jackhammered you in the whoops. If you were going to go fast on the darn thing, you're going to have the suspension done for sure. Thankfully, the motor was so slow, you probably weren't going to have too much trouble with worrying about going too fast. Well, the motor was slow, at least it was reliable. The engine was pretty trouble-free. The clutch was durable, although most people did not care for the feel of the clutch. The transmission also continued to be notchy. These Yamahas, pretty much anything before the modern era, they were pretty notchy. It wasn't as bad as it was in the mid-80s, but still wasn't as smooth as like a Honda or Suzuki at the time. A couple little issues with the bike. The front and rear wheels were butter soft. There's a lot of people had issues with the rims and also the hubs. The hubs exploded on a lot of people's YZs in '96. The 125 and the 250 both had this issue. The new bodywork was super slim. Most people really liked it. It was a little more narrow than '95 and slimmer through the middle, but there was issues with people who were a little bit short. If you were if you were above like 5'9", you probably wanted a flatter seat, a little taller seat because it was a little cramped. Guys with wore knee braces like myself also could catch on these little back of the shrouds, the little wing there. They would catch on your knee braces, which are really a pain, and as a result, would leave a really ugly white crease mark there. That's another thing about the blue plastic. This blue is a much deeper blue than what you have now in Yamahas. This 95 Works color was a very dark navy blue, and 96 and 97 have the same color, and it gets pretty beat looking pretty fast. In 98 they lightened that up a little bit. It definitely helped, but this first couple years it's really dark, and if you lay the bike over or something, it puts a pretty ugly white crease in the plastic. By most standards, I think you'd have to say the 96 YZ250 was a pretty disappointing machine for Yamaha. It was a step back from 95 in a lot of ways, but it really kind of paved the way for them to really take control of the class. Once they got the motor sorted out and the suspension tuned, they had an unbeatable machine that took Jeremy McGrath to several Supercross titles and dominated shootouts there in the late 90s and early 2000s. A really, really great motorcycle. And the DNA of that motorcycle's here. It just was a little rough in its initial outing. So there you have it, a look back at the 1996 Yamaha YZ250, a bike, like I said, that didn't exactly hit it out of the park on the first try, but set the stage for many more years of Yamaha success. If you like this sort of thing, please feel free to follow the channel, subscribe, and share it on social media. If you want to follow me, I also post all kinds of retro motocross stuff every day on Twitter and Instagram. That address is at Tony Blazer. That's TonyBlazier. And like I said, if you enjoy this kind of thing, I also write at pulpmx.com. I write classic steel. I will put a link to the accompanying article I wrote at PulpMX on this bike as well. So if you like reading it and seeing these pictures in that format, check it out. I've written several. Actually, I'm up to about 130 of them at this point. So there's pretty much any kind of retro bike you want to read about. I have an article in that genre. I'm slowly making my way through the catalog of all the bikes. So there's a lot of cool bikes to write about. So hopefully I'll keep doing that for a while. So as I said, I hope you enjoy this. And until we meet again, keep the rubber side down.